Hello, everybody. My name is Charles Bennett. Great to see you today. I hope you're having a brilliant conference. Before I introduce my fellow panelists, I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. We're living in a world where technology is accelerating at an incredible rate. Looking at the US alone, there are almost 400,000 patents alone granted last year. Despite all the upheaval, everything was going on. It always reminds me, and I actually think back, my grandfather always used to talk about technology and the rapid increase and the potential threats and opportunities it would create. And he was doing this decades ago. And he would always talk about that when he was only 5 years old, we were literally, when he was born, it was only 5 years after, we could fly 200 meters. By the time he was 60 years old, we could fly 2.2 billion kilometers around Saturn and back. The art of the possible means what used to take 10 years now takes 6. What we took 6 months, we can now do in 4. This thing called emerging technology has got so much potential, but we've got to harness it. And that's where the problem lies. Great experience, great customer experience, very human, it's personal, it's very intricate. We live in this ever more connected world and technology is enabled to do that. Everything that's gone in the past year and a half has possibly accelerated the level of connection we feel. It isn't quite as simple as that, all that, is it? Because we're in ever more connected worlds, but quite a lot of us are feeling ever more disconnected. The future is becoming really difficult to predict. So I want to sort of use that as just as our little opener. I just want to say a few words about our panelists and we'll get straight into our first question. So our first panelist is a marketing strategist and customer experience expert in the insurance sector. He specializes in aligning marketing strategies and product launch initiatives in line with the company's overall strategic direction. Customer experience drives many of his thinking patterns. He has overseen the lead and the definition of the operational blueprint for building a genuinely customer-centric company in Saudi Arabia and from first principles. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Ajil Al-Jarba.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful being here. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
Our second panelist is a learning and development and customer experience innovation expert. He's currently involved in the launch of Saudi Arabia's first dedicated customer experience training academy, which has 6 levels of practical certification. Please put your hands together, Mr. Hassan Mohammad.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Looking forward to it.
And our third and by no means last panelist, he's a chief digital officer and digital strategist. He's worked in a variety of sectors, most recently specializing in the insurance sector, but has worked with companies at the forefront of research and CX, such as Forrester. He specializes in digital transformation in large businesses, so vital to companies seeking to keep up with everything that technology has to offer. So, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome. Okay, so I want to get immediately into the first question. And I'm just going to go a little bit away just purely from technology because this is a customer experience panel. Now, customer experience is going superbly in Saudi Arabia. It's very much at the forefront. But we've had the opportunity to be able to do this sort of stuff in over 35 countries around the world. And I'm seeing a lot of people, especially to do with the downturn that's happened over the last year and a half, are saying the customer experience agenda is become a little passé. It's not driving the businesses to the extent that it possibly could do. What's tending to happen is investment in things like advertising, sometimes marketing, but also we're seeing increasingly customer experiences cut whenever companies go through a downturn. Is that right? I'm not sure it is, but I want to go talk to our panelists specifically about that. Hassan, let's start with you. What do you think?
Right. So what we're observing is that organizations cut off customer experience at the first, whenever something happens which goes in negative correlation with profitability and sales. So CX is the first thing that gets cut on budgets. Organizations do not see the importance and the value that customer experience brings to them. They look at it as a cost center and not a profit center. So that's majorly it. So there's an understanding that needs to be developed, especially within senior stakeholders, that see the importance of putting the customer right at the center of any organization. Partly this is possibly due to customer experience being seen only as a continuous improvement exercise. So we're gathering data, we're looking at what causes frustrations and pain points to our customers, and we're just trying to remove or fix those tiny little pain points instead of actually putting the customer right at the center of the business, looking at how can you innovate and really build innovative business propositions, business models, change the way business functions. In my opinion, that is one of the major reasons where CX is not given its due and its importance.
Interesting. Ajil, would you like to add to that?
Well, yeah, of course. Well, you started with a wonderful pace of how the world is changing and how technology is changing and expectations are changing. And I believe that sometimes companies view these changes as a burden, and therefore they just stop at status quo, trying to fix whatever the problem that they have, and just neglect the pace that the market is moving forward with. That's basically what I believe. The change is rapid. Sometimes companies aren't that fast to match that change.
And what is actually driving that? Because you've got into a really important point here. It's called the inertness, especially of our larger organizations. What's driving that lack of agility? Is it to do with our basic structures? Because actually the structures of our companies goes back 250 years at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. When we had this division of labor policy. That's where that initially came from. Is it inertness, or is it attitude and culture, or is it some of everything?
Well, most probably it's a combination of a lot of that. Today, we find ourselves with several projects running at the same time, and priorities keep on changing month in, month out. And that kind of creates some sort of chaos or misalignment within companies. And that's where I feel that they stumble on their steps moving forward. And the larger the company it is, the more difficult it is to maneuver with the quick changing demands.
Okay, so I think we need to bring in our third panelist, Tushar. I'd like you to comment a little bit about that, but think about this in the context of how supporting digital technology aligns, given our processes are difficult, our measures are not necessarily applied to the right processes and the right outcomes. We've got cultural challenges, we've got alignment challenges. Technology can be awfully complex, or certainly technology-driven change can be awfully complex. Can you add a few points from your perspective?
Sure. So before I start to give the digital or technology perspective, I just want to add one more point, right? When you ask this question about, the people or the company start slashing the CX, I think that fundamental question is to be asked, why there is a separate CX in first place, right? I think the basic question or basic direction should be, why CX is not the part of the every initiative that the company is going through, whether it is an organization, technology, or processes. Unless that happens, right? Having a dedicated CX team or a CX project or a CX program is always going to have that risk of getting cut off. So I just wanted to add that point, because when the core CX will be successful when every business owner and every initiative in the company has the CX KPIs aligned to it. Okay, so that is what I wanted to kind of just put that that perspective on that. The first question that you asked, right? Is it right that the customers or the companies are cutting the the CX initiatives? No, absolutely not. But I think the fundamental question to ask is why there are separate CX programs that can be cut. Okay, now on the technology or digital side point of things, see, these are enablers. So digital technology or any technology is an enabler for that CX. So again, unless and until the right KPIs and the right expectations from the customer segments and the experience that is required to deliver to that segment, if it is not defined clearly, whatever technology you have, it is not going to deliver that experience.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I'm going to add a point. This is a point which is actually quite close to my heart. And I'm going to go to just to a macro level. I think Saudi Arabia is got, in a really good way, it's the potential for what I call a perfect storm. It's going over this next 9 to 10 years through a transition into a genuinely service economy, fueled in by the commodity wealth that it's been able to generate. And that's a tremendous asset, because getting into customer experience driven companies and economies does take investment. There's probably more government CX driven initiatives going on than virtually anywhere else in the world right now. There is also an innovation mindset as being fostered pretty well all around the kingdom. It's also a young population, 60 to 70% below the age of 30. This is absolutely perfect to create that environment of change. And we don't have the legacies of all the infrastructure that, for example, Europe and the States have. But then again, it doesn't have all the cultural challenges, what I call the true developing economies, which Saudi and the rest of GCC come to that, absolutely does not have. There is a massive opportunity, and I absolutely agree with the points that have been made. The opportunity is massive. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to win the prize, but it means we've got every opportunity to, if we actually harness it effectively. So that's my own personal starter for 10. I want to get into the next bit. I want to get specifically into technology, because there was he died just over 10 years ago, the late, great Michael Hammer of Process fame. And he talked a lot about how do you predict a world that cannot be predicted? How do you prepare yourself for a world that cannot be predicted? And in many cases, let's go back from where we were 2 years ago. Would we have predicted any of this? I certainly wouldn't. There were 1 or 2 people, 0.001% that might have done. I certainly didn't. And I think the vast majority of people around here did not. And in fact, what we did find is a lot of companies actually were able to cope and align and change and adapt really fast. But that speed of change is not becoming the exception, it's becoming much more the norm. So I'm going to ask them probably the most unfair question I could ever ask. Where's technology in conjunction with customer experience going to be in the next 10 years? Hassan, I'm going to start with you.
Right, so we need to understand here that traditionally technology has always been prescribed within any organization. We need to understand that technology is, as Tushar mentioned, it's an enabler. It's there to help you deliver a certain experience. It's there to help you deliver or meet certain customer needs and wants. Often companies fell into the trap of just saying, oh, X company is investing in some piece of technology, let's do that as well. It's going to help sort out our issues. So that's the mindset shift that I see happening going ahead. Start off with the customer journey, with the customer needs, with the business strategy, and then dive down into what people, processes, and technologies require to deliver those experiences and meet those needs.
You see, that's an interesting one, but that puts some very significant implications on technology, because technology typically started from a very prescriptive time point. I still recall back where people say, we start from a blank sheet of paper. We'll go and talk to users. We'll look at the challenges. We'll look at the issues. We'll look at the strategy, and we'll basically build up from nothing, functional and technical requirements, sometimes building something which looks like Encyclopedia Britannica. The consequences, cost and time. In the context of how we prepare ourselves for technology-driven projects and initiatives in the world you've just talked about, how are you going to approach this?
So it's going to be moving away again from being prescriptive again to being adaptive and aligning, as I mentioned, aligning to your customer needs, aligning to the business strategy, and starting from there. Don't start the other way around by looking at, okay, let's bring in this technology. How is it going to fit in with our processes? Start with the journey, with the processes, and then look at the technology and what's required.
Tushar, can you pick up on that? Do you agree with some of the points made, or would you rail against any of the points that have been made so far, or would like to add a little bit more?
Yeah. No, I would definitely add a little more, but I do agree with the basic premise that the customer experience or the experience has to be defined first, and then see how the available technology can deliver that experience. Having said that, there are two elements for technology. One is the technology that we know, which is standard, and we know that how it can enable the experience that we are desiring to. But there is another part of technology, which is the emerging technology, which we do not know, or which, as you rightly said at the beginning, right? It's ever evolving world, and sometimes customer or even the businesses or the stakeholders don't know what to expect or what to deliver to the customers. And in such scenarios, having a dedicated efforts in terms of focusing on new technologies, having the ability to do kind of the prototypes or concepts regularly to figure it out if any new experiences can be delivered is also vital, right? So there are two elements. One is the technology that we don't know or might be coming, or is an emerging technology, and how can we leverage that, which will not fit into the current definition of experiences. And I will give you one very small example that how leaders or even people like us can identify where the world is moving today or maybe next 3 to 5 years. I was interacting with my 9-year-old son, right, the other day, and I was telling him, son, you need to get up early in the morning and do some physical activity or exercise to keep you fit and healthy. And being a son, he wasn't very happy with the idea of getting up early. He was challenging me. And I said, no, this is the rule. You get up early and you do. This is a traditional way of thinking. What he does, he doesn't ask me another question. He turns around and he says, Alexa, what is the best time to do exercise? And Alexa says the best time to do exercise is evening 5 to 6 p.m. And he does look back to me, and now what you have to say, right? So this is tomorrow's customer, right? He is not reading a book, or he's not even going to Google and finding out. He's just talking to a device, getting his answers back and challenge you back. And this is kind of the experience. He's going to be a major set of customers 10 years from now, right? So we have to keep looking at those hints and prepare that how the customer is going to change and how technology is going to support that change in future.
Thank you, sir. Actually, have you commented?
Well, yeah. I believe technology in the past was looked at as a supporting channel or an alternative platform. And today it's more of a primary serving platform. It's no longer a supportive device or a mean for people to communicate. It's wonderful when everything is streamlined and everything falls into a specific set of processes. The issue arises when something just falls off that stream. And then all the complexities of technology just all of a sudden become an obstacle. And it is no longer a blessing. It becomes more of a hassle where you just need to get some human interaction and go back to the old traditional ways. A lot of companies probably struggle with to adapt to these technologies because they assume that they know all the customer expectation or the experience, and that's how it's streamlined. Well, yes, it does cover a fairly good percentage of that, but that 1 or 2%, that is what really affects a company's word of mouth or their ability to actually, well, dominate against their rivals. And I believe we're getting into a more digital aspect or digital era, to the point that today human interaction, and as you just mentioned, you get your answers from a device such as an Alexa. So the dependency on the emotions of humans interacting with each other is not that big of an issue for the coming up generation. And that is something that also technology makers need to take into consideration.
You see, that's a really interesting point, because actually a lot of our decisions have, intrinsically emotional aspects in the context of what they have. And you're absolutely right. Whilst we are gradually getting better at being able to certainly recognize emotional driven behaviors, because seeing some of the technologies emerging, you can capture eye patterns, behavioral patterns. Artificial intelligence is getting really good at doing this. It brings us into a world of connection versus disconnection. In my opening paragraphs, I was talking about people talking about feeling increasingly disconnected. I was talking to some people in Ireland. We've got a big program over there at the moment. And one of the things they were saying is they've been 18 months and they've hardly been out of their houses. And it feels very, very artificial, the world that they're living in. Now, we're a world which is adapted very fast so far, but that level of disconnection is absolutely real. And human connection is actually about exactly the opposite. It's about connection. So Tushar, I'd love to think about what are some of the things just off the top of your head, because I have not prepared you for this. So this is a question straight out the blue. I should be apologizing. Straight out the blue. If we are going to create that extra level of connection, specifically in the context of a customer experience, in your role as a head of digital, what are you going to do? Because it's a real problem right now.
Yeah. See, I think the thinking should be rather than me serving my product to the customer, I think wearing the customer's shoes, that why customer is buying this product, what is customer's ecosystem for using this product. And I will take the insurance as an example here, right? Because I think that's my last experience, and maybe some of you will relate it. When I'm buying the travel insurance as a customer, why I'm buying an insurance? I'm buying insurance because I want to travel, not because I love insurance, right? So the customer's ecosystem is actually going from point A to point B for whatever purposes, maybe study, maybe holiday, or maybe visiting family, and insurance is part of that ecosystem. So the question needs to be asked for delivering the experience as an insurance company. How I can help customer to go from that one position to another position? Is there anything else I can do? Right. I will give you one more example, which is also kind of my previous role. When I was in a real estate company selling a house to a customer. When customer is buying a house, right, he has to make the payment and then wait for the house to be ready before he gets the possession of the house. Now, as a real estate company, I can always think, okay, I have built the house and given him the key and my role is done. But again, if you think from the customer's perspective, customer wants to move into the house, right? He wants to live there. And as a real estate company, if I ask myself, how can I help customer move into the house? Then suddenly there are a lot of more experiences that comes into the picture, right? Okay, I can help customer interior design the house. I can help customer by helping him, get access to the local schools, or maybe, the local stores, So there are multiple other experiences that can add value to your product propositions. And so the point what I'm trying to make here is think what is the customer's ecosystem, and all the industries are now kind of converging into this through the API mode of technology, or the connections that can be possible through multiple APIs. The more and more experiences can be thought through and can be identified. So my take on this is think from the ecosystem perspective and how you can play a role kind of to offer a specialized or more personalized experience. And in fact, one more point I will add before I will stop here is how much personalized that experience you can make for him, because you have the customer's data available through multiple touch points now, and not necessarily just your buying journey or serving journey, right? You can actually connect. And again, if I have to take the insurance as an example, if you are a health insurance provider, and if you are connecting customers Fitbit or the any other device and get that his health habits data with you, you can offer a lot more possibilities to him if you can get access to that data, right? So some of these examples, but I think the main thought is ecosystem from the customer's point of view, and how much personalized experiences you can deliver based on his data and his habits.
You didn't say this, Tushar, but there was a level of implication. Push back if you disagree.
No.
Do you think technologists are closely enough aligned to understanding their customer? They've got a massive responsibility, but are they understanding their customers well enough? And if not, what would you do about it over and above pumping yet more data as we go from big data, mega data, and I can't imagine what the next is going to be, gargantuan data? What are you going to do about it, Tushar?
Sure. So let me reiterate the question. Are you asking, do technologists understand this, or do business people? Because I believe
handle both. Handle both, because you've raised a really good question. Handle both.
Okay. See, for me, there is a little understanding of how to use or even capture this data in a lot of businesses, right? There is a lot of understanding that yes, data is important, we need to do this. And in fact, some of the companies actually are successful in capturing that data as well. I think where there is a struggle is going through that data, because there is a lot of data that can be captured. And how do you use that data to build meaningful insights before you can make any actions on that data, right? So both technologies or the business owners, they both need to do a lot more and need to understand how data can be leveraged for building new things is required. The gap can be filled through some of the data experts, and that's why they are highly in demand. But end of the day, the direct answer to that question is there is a bit of a struggle, because this understanding of the end-to-end flow of how data can be captured, mined, analyzed, and the insights can be built out of it is completely missing in today's world. But there are still a lot of big programs, there are a lot of money being pumped in, but this basic understanding of the entire flow from what data to capture and how that data will be used is kind of not very clear to a lot of stakeholders.
Hassan, can you pick up on that?
Yeah, just from that, I have a question further for all the panelists here. Is most companies focus on digitization and automation just to cut costs, improve efficiency, automate their processes, and they see that as the best achievement, but they're doing that at the expense of removing human interaction, right? So where do you draw the line between automation, digitization, and having that human element within a business that adds value to companies?
So are you actually proposing moving away? Because I mean, the Amazonian effect is moving down to the single moment of truth.
Yeah.
You press this button and this miracle, oops, a whole host of things happen.
Yeah.
And it's almost what you're suggesting is we're starting to add a bit more friction into our processes rather than less. Is that where you're going?
Possibly friction or more empathy and the human connection into it. And it depends on the organization again.
And you think that's missing?
I sense that organizations are just moving blindly towards digitization at the expense of the human connection. Yeah.
What do you think, Ajil?
Well, I believe it's a very good question. And I think that with the business mind of a company, the first thing that they're going to look at is how to reduce their costs.
Yeah.
And if you automate everything, and if you put artificial intelligence into that mix as well, then if anything just falls out of that stream, humans probably don't even know how to resolve it anymore.
Right.
Because it's so automated. And yes, that really creates an issue for the customer experience itself. So drawing the line is a question that I believe everyone should ask themselves before they jump into that technology pool. End of the day, we're all here for the customer. And if we're unable to service that to a very fine balance between what needs to happen automatically and what needs to happen emotionally.
Yeah.
Well, you always need that human interaction at one point or another.
It's almost, and I'm going to put words in your mouth a little bit here.
All right.
Is you're almost suggesting that actually the people who are building or responsible for directing or creating digital direction are perhaps not intimate enough with the customer journeys, the outcomes, and what they're feeling. In other words, they perhaps understand it from a requirements perspective, but they're not feeling it.
Yes, I very much agree with that. That feeling element, whether you're building a business process or you're coding it into whatever technological platform, you're not really considering the human emotion in that build. You're considering functionality. You're considering how to shorten the start to end goal, and how to generate as much revenue with with the least cost possible. You don't really throw emotions into that mix. And if anything goes wrong, and then you've got someone that needs to fix it, well, he didn't really code it or do the whole journey itself, and that becomes a hassle. And you just fall off that stream.
Right. This is something though, let's pick up on this. And let's say, for the sake of the audience, because there'll be people in the audience who are saying, no, I don't agree with this. We don't suffer from this here. But there'll be other people who will be saying, yes, we absolutely do. I'm going to go to you from a learning and development perspective.
Charles, can I interrupt you?
Jump in.
To add one point.
Jump in, go for it.
Sorry for that. I think I want to add to the point just mentioned, right? So it's not about automation completely. I think it's about having an omni-channel experience available for the customer. And again, what is happening is still a lot of companies are focusing the automation or digitization projects separately than the call center projects, or then just, if they have like a stores or any physical presence, those kind of, they all kind of run separately. So what is happening is the data or the customer layer is not synced. It's still in a siloed way. So if you have, as a customer is experiencing or requiring an experience at a certain point of his customer journey, if he has changed the channel from a digital to a physical at certain point of time, even today, and I'm surprised that he has to start the journey again because he has just changed the channel. And unless and until the companies, right, understands this basic omni-channel principle, that it's the customer who will decide how he wants to interact with you and not the other way around, this siloed experience will keep happening. And it has a cultural change requirement, it has a technology data connection requirements, and it also has the processes change requirement as well. So, and that only when this happens, the emotional angle can be covered, because then you can minimize the cost, because now everything is interconnected and you can take the decisions which is in favor of customer. So,
but if the customer's going to decide, and I absolutely agree with you, by the way, that places real implications on those supporting operations to be able to react to it. Absolutely. And we use words like omni-channel, but reality is it's creating adaptive, flexible approaches and the ability to almost retrofit bits in and retrofit bits out, almost not on a whim. I don't think that's pushing it too far, but in high levels of flexibility. That's what you're suggesting.
Yes, absolutely.
To get to that though, and that brings us on beautifully, by the way, onto how we manage to, what we do to prepare people, because if the customers are going to decide, our technologists need to be really aligned to those customer understanding their beliefs, those wants and needs, which not only change, they can change on a whim, they can change very, very quickly. So this is true adaptive thinking in an otherwise inert world. How are we going to create that a little bit of alignment? Just 1 minute, because I've got one more big question before we close.
Right. So both customer-facing and non-customer-facing staff members or employees should understand firstly their personality types, but also different personality types of customers. How do we deal with them? How do we deal with customer emotions and trauma? So this is an element of service excellence, or developing that service culture within an organization is imperative in these kind of situations from a learning and development perspective.
Brilliant. Okay. Moise, I don't know if you're there.
Sorry,
jump in, Tushar, please. Yeah,
I think building the employee journeys is also kind of critical.
Yes.
To just confirm what he said. So when you draw your customer journeys, also ensure you build the employee journeys for the same customer experience to ensure and to find out how you can make life of that employee easier, so that he can make or he can deliver a better experience to the customer.
I have a quick point for our there's apparently a couple of questions from our audience. They've not actually arrived into the chat. So Moise, please can you actually get them into the chat or over to my trusty mobile. But there is one question I want to say to the panel while these two questions come through. You're jumping into a lift. You've got 1 minute. And your CEO jumps in. What 3 messages are you going to give him about how to prepare a massive transformation program in the era of the customer? What 3 things should he think about right now, which is perhaps slightly different to the traditional feature, function, advantage, benefit approach? Tushar, it's a really unfair question. You haven't been prepared, but I'm going to start with you.
I have a very simple answer. The 3 things are
Go for it.
customer, and customer. So basically, the 3 things that they have to, you have to know your customer. You have to find out what experience you want to deliver in terms of propositions or the service experiences, right? And then decide on how those experiences can be delivered within the organization. I think that has to be the flow for any initiatives or any program. And then the business case comes, whether that experience is good enough or, is a business beneficial to the company or not. That is the, the final step. But the flow has to be, who's my customer, what experience and proposition I need to provide to him, and then whether I have a technology or the business case to justify it.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Because the questions are coming through. So
Yes.
your 1 minute on that. It's a lot. It's a relatively short lift.
Yeah, sure. So number 1, invest in your people, develop your people, develop their customer skills, but also look at developing their technological and innovation skills. Number 2, understand your customers and your staff members at the same time.
Is that data or is that more?
No, that's it's data plus it's spending time on the ground with your customers. Ethnography, so it's observing them and putting yourself into your customer's shoes, thinking about their outcomes, outcome-based thinking. That's number 2. Number 3 is spend time outside of your industry. Look at what other industries are doing. That's where you can look at and potentially very different industries. Helps you to open doors towards innovation.
I would like to draw attention to outcome-based thinking. It's one of the range. What Hassan was referring to is a new branch of techniques which get to create an understanding of customer beyond what data will tell you. Data creates distortion. It has to be handled with care. There is a huge amount of insight on that. If we had a little bit more time, we'd get into that. But handle data with care. It can create distortion. I'll give you a couple of real good examples. Europe, Brexit. Everybody thought Brexit was going one way. Right at the last minute, it went completely the other. We've got a British Prime Minister in the last 2 years who was actually, or her data was telling them they were going to get in an increased majority. It went completely the opposite way. And we've got one of the more powerful politicians, the highly polarizing Mr. Trump, who when he in his first go round, nobody thought he'd win. He surprised the world. We had all the data, we had all the experts, they got it wrong. Data is something which has to be handled with care, immensely powerful. Don't think necessarily data gives you all the answers. There's other thinking patterns, and outcome-based thinking is certainly one of them. Ajil, what would your key point on this to be?
Well, I couldn't really say it any better than Hassan. Yes, it is look at your people, look at your customers, and do look around. I can't really add anything to that. And Tushar as well, looking at the customer. Yes, that is what all businesses are about. They are about the customer. So yes, I'll have to agree with Hassan and Tushar as well. Thank you. Yeah, that's my thought on that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Right. We've gone over time. Anisha, I gather there are a couple of questions from the audience.
Yes, we do have.
We're happy to take them.
Yes. So Saeed Rani is asking, what are the best metrics to measure CS success?
To measure?
Customer experience success.
Customer experience success. I'd love to get into this, but I'm the moderator, so I won't. Tushar.
I think the one thing to get, and a lot of companies have tried it, is the NPS. So you can have NPS score across different points of the journeys, whether it is sales journey or a service journey. So that can give you a very good indication. But end of the day, the real KPIs or the success metrics would be what is the customer acquisition or the retention numbers you have. That is what ultimately is going to tell you the success. But NPS can be a directional KPI before you can see those two in terms of acquisition or retention ratios.
I'd agree with that. I mean, NPS can be a really powerful one. It has its challenges without a doubt.
Yep.
One of the things about NPS, which is not necessarily so well understood, is that as a customer goes through their own process, their own journey, there are emotional triggers that happen as they go through that journey. And the NPS starts to reflect some of the peak and end elements of the emotional triggers as they go through that journey. And as confidence and trust grows, then the ability of the organization to influence their customer base increases. So from that perspective, NPS is incredibly useful as long as, I repeat it even again, you pay attention not just to the quantitative, that's easily amended, that's easily influenced and changed. It's the qualitative insight. But I totally agree with your points there. Listen to the qualitative insight, not just the number. Do you have any point on? No. Okay. Hassan would like to add a point on that.
Yeah, just the point on that is whatever you measure, whatever metrics you have, make sure that you're going to take action on it, or at least respond. If you're measuring and there's no action taken, that's going to disappoint a lot of customers. So that's my point on it. So there's NPS, there's CSAT, there are a number of metrics. It depends on the type of organization. NPS is a really good metric. It measures the overall relationship the brand has with its customers. So you could also deep dive into more micro metrics like complaints, number of objections. So there are either a number of ways of creating a whole metric or measurement strategy.
I totally agree with that. One quick point before I hand back to Anisha is don't just simply open the big book of metrics and then choose which ones suit you. Understand your outcomes and experience associated outcomes and align directly to them. You may end up even creating new metrics. You end up being what you measure. So choose what you measure really wisely. Anisha, there was at least one more question, or we run out of time?
We'll take one more question. This is coming from Alain Psycho, right? He's asking, what examples of digital implementation, which is physical digital, can the panelists point to as the best practice in the region, especially in traditional bricks and mortar retail?
Best practice implementation in the region. Example.
Physical digital for retail companies.
Okay. Tushar, do you have an immediate observation on that?
I don't have any observation in the region, unfortunately. I do have some examples from Europe, if those are okay to mention. But from the region, no, I don't have, unfortunately.
We're involved with creating one right now, but I can't talk too much about it for a number of different reasons, which frustrates me immensely. It is a fantastic question. I'm bursting at the seams to answer it, and I'm physically not allowed right now. In about 2-3 months, I would be able to, but I can't. Hassan, have you got any more observations? One last before we close.
No specific ones. I mean, it varies from company to company, so there's no specific best practices.
Okay, that's cool. That isn't then probably the necessarily the greatest answer, but by all means, certainly get in touch with us if you want to get, and we'll think through a little bit more detail. It's really difficult to get to that best practice digital example. I will say that if you want to get to the best practice, start with the outcomes you are trying to create. Understand those wants and needs really well. Align it back into the processes that are going to deliver against those. Make sure you align the right measures of success. Define your technology which actually directly support it. Understand those human interactions that you need. Those are the sort of things that came out. So in other words, whilst if organizations that are following that approach of customer first, outcome first, aligning it back, don't forget the 5 levels of outcome that regularly get talked about. Everybody talks about outcome to the company, which is usually about P&L, particularly for private organizations. Outcome to customer, understanding wants and needs better than we have. Always consider outcomes to an employee. Any level in charge of change needs to consider the very people who are the gold dust for your organization, which are our people. And these stakeholders, outcome to stakeholders, and the one which rarely gets considered, outcome relating to the social agenda. Or if you're aligning all those outcomes, impacts your strategy, impacts your processes, impacts everything you do. They very often conflict. They conflict from a time perspective. They conflict from a people perspective. They conflict from many. Harmonization at an outcome level at the very, very start. You want to get best practice change, understand those outcomes and harmonize those at the beginning. So we all have a unified focus. Then we have at least half a chance of actually getting that right. So those are some very personal points. Anisha, any more questions for the audience?
We're done with the questions, Charles.
Okay, thank you. So a very, very big thank you to Tushar, Dani, Hassan, Mohammad, and Ajil Al-Jarba. My name is Charles Bennett from CXSA. Pleasure to speak to you all today. Hope you have a great session, rest of session. If we can do any more to give you value, please let us know. All the best. Have a great rest of conference.